Welcome to the Spawn Chunks, episode number 357 for Monday, July 7th, 2025. This is a podcast all about Minecraft, available wherever you get your podcasts. If you're enjoying the show, consider subscribing wherever you're listening to this. My name is Johnny, but the internet knows me as Pixelriffs, and joining me, fresh from the outside world, is Joel Duggan. Hi, Joel.
Hello, I have touched grass and sand, as a matter of fact, and the ocean. It was very cold. I went to the beach on Saturday, and it was a fun summer day, fun summer trip. There was strawberries, there was beer, there was all kinds of fun things. Johnny has also been prepping for a tabletop adventure that's coming up later on tonight. And those are the kind of things that we talk about in the Render Distance, which is the extended version of the program. You can get that by going to patreon.com/thespawnchunks and sponsoring the podcast. It is, I think, one of the first times we recorded in July, if not the first, because last time it was the 30th, I want to say. So thank you to all of our patrons for supporting us for yet another month. We really, really appreciate it. And you don't get just the Render Distance. There's also things like the monthly Minecraft Hangout that's coming up on the last Saturday of July, as well as the quarterly Hangouts, where once a quarter, Johnny and I sit down and talk about how the podcast is doing, talk about download numbers, YouTube views, that kind of thing. So if under the hood, behind the scenes is your cup of tea, then check out the Render Distance at patreon.com/thespawnchunks. And coming up on this episode of the podcast, we've got, of course, the Copper Golem and all of the copper things that are coming to the game, including email specifically about that. So our whole show is going to center around the Copper Golem coming to Minecraft.
It's a show tailor-made for me. As a former Copper King, and still, I think, spiritually very much a Copper King, so excited to get into today's discussion. And a lot of that is what I've been doing in Minecraft this week. I hopped on to Bedrock Edition just to take a look at that on stream later, so excited to bring that to the discussion a little bit later on. What's new in your Minecraft life, Joel?
So I have been hard at work in Westhill. We are getting much closer to finishing things, actually. And I'll have a bunch of screenshots to share here with our live audience in the Discord. And I have finished the North Road, completely done. That involved transitioning the stone brick road into a dirt road as it kind of goes by the farms. It becomes less refined. And I had to redo that kind of transition. I had roughed it out briefly, but it involved a lot more detail. And I do find that in situations like that, it's good to use things like mangrove wood and acacia logs to kind of like rough up situations, get more browns in there, more grays, a lot of gravel and cobblestone, that kind of stuff, a lot of cracked stone, as you would expect. But then also I've been using the rooted dirt and the packed mud and other blocks to kind of like make those transitions. And it's worked out pretty well. I've really enjoyed the way that the road looks now. And then that road turns into a path that goes over the North Ridge. And this was tricky. This is also something that's been kind of like a running joke in my stream, because I've been walking up this ridge. Whenever I leave the area, I tend to walk through Westhill as opposed to fly over it most of the time, just to kind of show off the build. And it's a nice way to chat with your live audience and whatnot. And every time I go up this ridge, I say, man, I really need to finish this, because the other side's been done forever. But this south side of the ridge just was a bunch of slabs and just enough that you could run up it without having to jump. But there was no detail, there was no foliage, there was no trees, nothing. And so I took the time to completely curate this kind of descent into the Westhill Valley. And I included a look-off point. So just before you go down this side of the ridge, there's a little path that shoots off to the right. And you can go out and see like most of Westhill Valley actually from that point, which is really cool. And I forgot how much I enjoy doing paths that are through densely wooded areas. Like I have done a lot of pathing recently, but it's all been like a path connecting two roads, a path through the town, a road through the valley. Like there's no trees for miles. They're all on the border, but it's really immersive to be able to go through like a taiga forest and create like a coarse dirt path and add some different textures, add the ferns and the too tall grass, and the new bush block, of course, is very handy, and work through all of that to customize the experience and kind of like focus the player's view, and it kind of like makes you look down at where you're going, so then you can look up at where you arrive when you kind of round the corner and come down and arrive at the bottom. And I'm really happy to have it done, because that really leaves only two more things in the Westhill Valley, one of which I've moved on to, which is the bee farm, and then the west bank of the Spruce River. And so that's the bigger project. I've done a lot of landscaping, so I thought I want to break. I'm going to start this bee farm. And I've got no plans. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I tried to work in some fun colors like honeycomb blocks and maybe some yellow terracotta, but the scale of this house to make it work with everything else, the roof is only 2, maybe 3 blocks high in places, so it's just not enough to get like a gradient going, or things like a pumpkin or those kind of blocks like glazed terracotta. They really kind of look at a place because at that scale they just kind of look odd. And so ultimately what I went with was composters. And it turns out that either through some sort of subconscious artistic effort or just luck, it still looks like bee related. The stripes that end up going across the roof sort of look like stripes on a bee. And also a composter kind of looks like a dried out bee's nest.
Yeah.
And I wanted to try to incorporate bee's nest into the roof because I've done that before to great success and it works really well with jungle wood. But the problem, of course, is that if I want to populate this area with bees, I don't want the bees to then start nesting in the roof. I want them to stay on the beehives that I'm going to put on the ground. And in some of the screenshots I'm sharing, I've got some stripped logs that are just placeholders for the stands that all the beehives are going to go on. I'm going to use the ones that are made by the player, not the nests that you find naturally in the world. And I don't want the bees to then travel into the house and like start like going in and out of the roof. It would be a little bit weird. So composters was a good kind of fix. And I was able to transition from the composters into some jungle wood for trapdoors and then into some spruce to kind of break up the roof palette. And it worked out pretty well. I have yet to do the inside. It's only the first stage of this build. It's very much a work in progress. So the paths outside are just rough. Some of them are path blocks. Some of them are coarse dirt. And then the exterior palette is done. I haven't done all of the texturing, but all the block choices on the exterior are done. And I went through, and this is a tip that I've shared before, but after I roughed out the roof shape, got it where I wanted it, and roughed out the footprint of the house, I went inside and I started to roughly plan out the interior, not detail it, but like definitely put down like a cauldron and a counter and a, where do I want the kitchen? Where do I want the stairs? Can I have stairs? And it really worked out well and informed me that, maybe I need to nudge this wall a block to the left or the right, like that kind of stuff. And I really like doing that because nothing bothers me more than finishing a house from the outside and having it look really good, and then to go inside and feel like you're claustrophobic or like you can't fit all of the things in the house that you wanted.
Yeah.
I mean, as it stands, none of the houses in West Hill Valley have bathrooms, none. Because like I didn't think about it and it just didn't seem all that important. So maybe I have to start putting outhouses in some places. But anyway, like it has a kitchen, it has an upstairs, it has a bedroom, or will have a bedroom. And it has like a kind of an entryway and a back deck and stuff. So like it's a little bit above like your really basic farmhouse, but I'm happy with the way things are going.
You're in medieval society, though, at this point, so surely just like a chamber pot or something, like just put a decorated pot in one corner. We all know what that's for, but like, don't worry about it. That's I imagine like the equivalent in this sort of Minecraft civilization, and like is the kind of in medieval times. Like I'm thinking about like the period dramas that are set in like Shakespearean era, where people are just like emptying pots of stuff into the streets. That's that kind of thing. But I think the other fun thing about this, I absolutely clocked the composters kind of looking like beehives, and I thought that's a really great choice. The other thing is the way that the roof arches are shaped kind of reminds me a little bit of the holes on the front of the bee nest texture that the bees kind of enter and leave by, those sort of natural like hive holes. So I think in a couple of subtle ways, it's sort of evoking the bee architecture to begin with. I think the only thing you could have done that was like more bee-like would be to put some kind of hexagonal structure somewhere, but we all know how difficult those are to plan and build in Minecraft, especially at small scales. So no, I think this has the quaint kind of countryside vibe of something like that. Is obviously to scale with a lot of the other stuff you've already built around West Hill, and yeah, I think it looks perfect for what it is. Also the paths through the forest, like you were saying, that it's so nice kind of building this stuff that feels well trodden and lived in, but still has these kind of like subtle touches and control over the environment. That's something that on the Misadventures server, there's a bunch of them that have put together like the Road Builders Guild, because we don't have means to fly around on that server. We don't have access to the end and Elytra. We're not on the update that has happy ghasts. So I think it's really fun that people have started to work in paths around all of the features that we're building on that server, and it's exactly this kind of stuff. It's all kind of like dirt path, like a little bit of gravel, a lot of subtle nature touches, and kind of custom small-scale terraforming around the outside, just lending it enough of a bit of a difference that it feels like it's not natural Minecraft terrain anymore. And that's even considering that our world is generated with Terralith, but people have been leaving their mark everywhere, and it looks very much like what you've done here.
Thanks. Yeah, I think there's something to be said for even just like extra bone meal or a slab of andesite that looks like a rock, just enough to like steer the player. Like, I'm going to get you to kind of think about going right here, because it looks like it would be kind of a pain in the butt as a human, even though it doesn't matter in Minecraft. But as a human, you're looking ahead like, that looks like it's a pain to walk over. I'm going to go where it's a lot easier to walk. And that law of least effort is a great way to kind of steer the player. And it's great for directions, because like, I don't have to tell people, you know, if they arrive at the northern fort, which I shared a few weeks ago, this road connects to that. So if someone comes to the medieval zone on the Citadel, they want to find West Hill, go to the fort and head south. Follow the road. Like, you cannot make a wrong turn. There are no turns. You're not going to have to like give directions to a certain like biome and then head left. Like, it's just follow the road. You'll get there. And it really does a lot to kind of like steer the player and have it not be boring. Like, you're not just walking in a straight line, right? Which I think is nice too.
Yeah, I'm guilty of walking in a straight line too often in Minecraft. Like, I always want to get from A to B via the shortest possible path, and so a lot of my paths would end up going over like 3-meter drops and stuff. Like the kind of thing that if you're thinking about it realistically, like nobody would dare attempt, or you'd be putting yourself at risk of like continuing to fall. But in Minecraft, you don't think about it twice, because that's like a shorter distance than actually involves any fall damage. But yeah, it's great to see like bits of this coming together. And you'd mentioned that you're only trying to do the stuff that's like visible from West Hill, or like, helps you enter the area so you get a good view of West Hill. But this seems like it's just kind of on the boundary of that. So how much is left? Like, what else is on the to-do list at this stage?
There's only just the bee farm and the west bank of the Spruce River, and I say just the Spruce, like it's a long river. So like when you're looking at this the screenshot of the entirety of the West Hill Valley with the wheat farm in front of you, that bank on the right hand side stretches the entire length of the valley, and that's what I've got to address. Now, some of it is going to be a waterfall that is very specific and I want to look cool. And the rest of it is going to be like, I just need to put grass and ferns on all the blocks and just bone meal them to make them look overgrown, which a tip I've shared on the show before. And so it's not difficult. It's just a little time consuming. So it's probably a good 3 streams of working on the Spruce Banks. It depends on how many points of interest I decide. Like if I get inspiration and say like, oh, you know what, this might be fun to have, like a marshy area here, or reeds or something like that with some sugarcane. That'll take a little bit extra time, but I'm really not going to go too hard on it. I think I'm just going to go through and make sure it doesn't feel like you said vanilla Minecraft. Like I want it to feel like the border of the area and not a place that's forgotten about. And the only reason for that is I think because I've put so much detail into all of the landscaping around the farms when it's directly next to something that's just vanilla Minecraft generation. Speaking of, this is vanilla 1.15 generation. That's how old this area is. Yeah. So it does feel a little bland. And so by sprucing it up a little bit, pardon the pun, it'll feel a little bit more contained. And then the very last thing is the distillery that I want to put underneath the keep. And the reason why that's last is that it's currently my storage system. Like that's where all my shulker boxes are and all my bulk grass and dirt. And I've got to find a place to put all that. So I'm going to move it all over to the crypt. But it's just, that's one of those things where I might not move all that stuff on stream. It's kind of boring. So like I might just move a lot of those bulk blocks and stuff like that. I need more shulker boxes. So there might also be like a bit of a break to go to the end to get some shulker boxes and stuff like that first.
Yeah. Well, I've been to the end this week. I took a happy ghast out there as per my promise on a previous show. Yeah. I raised a happy ghast up from a ghastling in the end dimension rather than trying to like put it in a minecart to take it through the portal or anything like that. I did it the relatively easy way. And it turned out to not be such a slow trip. I mean, it took about 4 minutes to cross the Void of the End, which is definitely faster than it took when I did this with a flying machine with like slime blocks or honey blocks or whatever previously. So yeah, overall, not the worst way to get around the end. It certainly feels slower when you have the context of how slowly things are moving around you. But when you're
Right.
traveling out over the void of the end, you don't really know how fast you're traveling. So as far as you could tell, you could be going to warp, but because there's nothing there to really show you how slow the movement is, it's actually fairly peaceful. The advantage I have found to flying a Happy Ghast out there compared to flying with Elytra as well is that you don't have to worry as much about whether or not you're losing height, because if you're facing forward to travel through the void, you're still maintaining your y-axis, you're maintaining your like the level that you're
Right.
flying at, whereas flying through the void of the end with Elytra can be kind of disorienting. You don't know whether you're losing momentum and traveling up or down, and since you have nothing to compare that to, I found myself in Java Edition turning on the F3G chunk grid so you can actually see where you are in terms of like sub chunks, and if you're like losing height and need to boost yourself again, or using coordinates or something like that to make sure you don't dip down into the void by accident. But yeah, once I got there, I basically had to turn around and come back again because there wasn't really an end city nearby close enough that I could demonstrate, like, this is how easy it is to raid an end city. But I've at least put the idea in people's heads for the sake of the tutorial. That was sort of the point. Back at the Windy City, I have been working on my Ghast garages, so I've built up a bit more of a structure around these, mostly with the consideration of the player not wanting to suffocate in blocks above where the Ghasts are being parked. I went into the mechanism of that on last week's show, but essentially it's just a 4x4 space. You align yourself with a couple of blocks so that the Ghast kind of slides in easily, and then you trap yourself in there with a piston so that the Ghast doesn't fly out the front of it again. And overall, I built 4 of these so far, and because the area of the Ghast's like hangar bay is a 4x4 space, that being an even number, I've had to make all of the roof peaks split roof peaks so that one half of it comes out slightly to make it look like it actually peaks with a single block so that it's not like a big, wide, flat section of roof in between, just for the aesthetic of that. I've built a central peaked roof over the top because there are 4 bays of each of the Ghasts separated by a pillar. It's still overall an odd number build, so I can have like a larger roof at the back that comes to a point, and I just need to extend that backwards and figure out the overall structure of the building from there. But it sort of has the aesthetic of like a sort of Industrial Revolution era, Victorian era factory here in the UK, where there's a lot of like stone brick and then clay red bricks, a bit of sandstone here and there, timber frame, that kind of thing. Going along with the sort of like vaguely steampunky industrial vibe that I want the Windy City to have, but there aren't too many other buildings in the area right now, so as far as an established build style goes, it's starting eclectic and it's going to stay eclectic. But overall, I think this worked out really well for Happy Ghast housing, and I've got like a little kind of arched brick roof over each one of them. There's plenty of room. It doesn't feel too claustrophobic, but it still feels like you're walking into like a garage space where you'd want kind of like a lower roof and like not too much headroom above. Each of them has an unloading and loading bay for the chest boats that they can carry underneath, and yeah, I'm pretty happy with this so far. I have raised a 4th Ghast, but I was finding that I enjoyed seeing a couple of them parked in there, but I was also using the Happy Ghast to do some of the detail of the roof arches, and having had a bit more hands-on experience with them now, it's actually really great being able to fly up and edit stuff. I, like many people, am still finding that the most difficult part of it is when you want to just go down a couple of blocks. Having to change your angle of view to move vertically is maybe a little bit awkward, but overall, I'm having a really good time with it. And building sort of from the ground up limits the amount of time that you have to spend like looking down awkwardly or looking up and then pressing backwards to descend again. So overall, like, I think it's been a really positive experience with the Happy Ghast so far, and I like seeing their little faces peeking out of it when they're all facing the right direction.
I mean, it's a cool looking build, and I think that on top of just like the slick design, it's also iconic in that once you associate this large white gable with the Happy Gas garage, then you'll be able to spot that either as a viewer or as you're going around like, all right, I'm done with this Happy Gas, I need to go put it back, and like you immediately can pick out the white gable of the garage from the horizon. It's like, all right, I'm just head over in that direction. And I like the idea of having the boats unloaded and stuff in the bottom as well. Like the garages that I've seen, including yours, they sort of feel like, I don't want to say forklift because it has the wrong kind of like idea of motion, but they feel more like cradles than they
Yeah.
do garages. Like it's kind of like you want something on the top and the bottom left and right for the gas to kind of be cradled in, and then you
Mm-hmm.
want like the top middle obviously clear because that's where you are and you need to mount and dismount the gas, but then you also need the bottom clear because that's where the boat hangs. And while it could probably, I mean, the leads probably go through the blocks, but it would make more sense for them not to, and to have that clear space and whatnot. And also of course the ghast has the tentacles that dangle down, and you want those to
Mm-hmm.
look like they're being free. And it would look strange if the tentacles were kind of like going through the rocks and stuff. But it's fun. I really like it. And to your point about having some of them in there and one being used, I think the idea is even clearer when one of the stalls is empty.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
That's what I was thinking too. Like it's kind of fun having an empty parking bay that you're like, oh, I could come in and park there. I've also been using the one stray ghast when it's sort of idling. I've tried to like land on top of it with elytra to take these screenshots. So if a couple of them look like they're from weird angles, it's because I was just making do with wherever the ghast like put me. But yeah, ultimately, having really fun time with these. I still need to do a big like detail and texture pass on this build. I'm just kind of roughing out the shapes and materials for the most part, but I will definitely check back in future episodes once a bit more of that is built, and it'll be appearing in the survival guide before long as well. I've not been doing as much on Misadventures just because I've been fishing for conduits. The only way we can get hold of Hearts of the Sea is through the fishing minigame quest that happens at the central city of Maryport, since we have no access to buried treasure ships either in the RPG world or the resource world. So it's been slow going, but it's been fun trying to get hold of those for use in my Sky City. We're going to move on to the news, though, because we have some very exciting news this week. Minecraft Bedrock Edition Preview 1.21.100.23 was released with some exciting features, which were also featured in an article called A New Friend with a Familiar Patina. Both of those are linked in our show notes. They're over at minecraft.net. And to quote that article, the first features from our third game drop of 2025 are available to test now in Bedrock Beta and Preview, and coming soon to Java Snapshot. Get a new companion in the form of the Copper Golem and its chest, then discover tools, weapons, and armor also made from copper. So in experimental features in this version for Bedrock Edition, the Copper Golem has been added. Summoned with copper and carved pumpkins, the Copper Golem removes items you leave in copper chests and sorts them based on the item type into chests around your base. Copper Golems are summoned by placing one copper block of any age and placing a carved pumpkin on top. This produces a Copper Golem and a copper chest, both of which are oxidized to the corresponding level of the block used to create them. The Copper Golem will still drop between 1 and 3 copper ingots when killed, and they can help by sorting items into chests. If the Copper Golem isn't holding an item, it looks for nearby copper chests to try and pick up an item. The Copper Golem will look in any oxidized and waxed copper chest variant in order to pick up items, and can pick up a maximum of 16 items in a stack at a time. Any item in a copper chest can be picked up, so it will do unstackables as well. And if the Copper Golem is holding an item, it will look for nearby regular chests to try and place the item in. The Copper Golem will look in both chests and trap chests to try to place items according to this changelog, although right now there's a bit of an issue where it seems like they don't search for trap chests, but we'll cover that a little later. It can place an item in a chest if the chest is empty, or if it contains the same type of item the Copper Golem is holding. They will visit a maximum of 10 chests or copper chests in sequence to try to pick up or place an item, but if no matching chest is found, the Copper Golem idles for 7 seconds before trying again. The search area for chests from the Copper Golem's position is horizontally 32 blocks and vertically 8 blocks. The copper chest, added along with the Copper Golem, is a new type of chest that has wax and oxidized variants. Copper chests oxidize over time, they can be waxed like other copper blocks, but they can also be crafted by the player using a chest and some copper ingots. Copper tools were added in this experimental feature set as well. The full tool set is now available in copper, including the axe, hoe, pickaxe, shovel, and sword. These tools and weapons are crafted and repaired using copper ingots. They do the same amount of damage as stone, but have higher durability. Copper tools work a little faster than stone tools, but they are slower than their iron counterparts, and they also have higher enchantability than diamond, but slightly less than iron. Copper armor has higher durability than leather, but less than iron. Copper armor enchantability sits slightly lower than iron at the moment, but all 4 armor pieces can be crafted, so there's a helmet, a chestplate, leggings, and boots, all now made of copper. In addition to that, copper equipment turns into copper nuggets when smelted. They currently don't have any other purpose than recrafting into copper ingots. This Bedrock preview changelog also provides a bunch of gameplay tweaks, parity changes, and bug fixes. There are a handful of fixes for the Happy Ghast and leashes, and the Void preset has been added to your flat world options as well if you're a Bedrock player. The full details can be found in the changelog, linked at our show notes at thespawnchunks.com.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff to talk about before we get into the Copper Golem later in the show. And Copper tools and armor was not something I saw coming, but
Yeah.
I mean, it makes sense because it lines up with having gold and iron and diamond and all of the other, things that we pull out of the ground, and especially because those have ingots and copper has ingots, but then we didn't have copper armor and tools until just now. So how do you feel about the copper tools and armor fitting into the game?
See, at the moment, because I'm in a developed, survival world, like most of the worlds that I play in right now, I've got diamond tools or netherite tools and, similarly, armor. I don't really expect to use copper material for tools and armor at the point where I'm at. But I stepped into Bedrock Edition just in a fresh world to check out the preview in survival, and I think that has reframed my expectations about this, because if you're starting fresh with no sort of clear advantage over the mid to late game tools, I thought maybe copper tools are going to just be for early game. And copper is everywhere. It's something that you're used to ignoring as you go caving in the early game, because as experienced players, we know that copper is really just for aesthetic things, and it's added a couple of extra uses. It's got the lightning rod, it's got the spyglass, it's got this and that here and there. But it's most likely going to be the first ore that you find. When I went caving, I just kind of found a nearby shallow cave to look for my first resources. Once I had stone, I found copper before I found coal. So you're going to run into copper pretty regularly, and especially as a new player, I think it's a point of friction maybe that they've encountered, maybe a piece of feedback that they've had regularly from newer players, that the first metal they find can't be used to make tools and armor with, and that feels kind of weird. The way I'm looking at this is it's all about caving confidence. We had a big discussion around the time 1.18 changed terrain generation about people finding it difficult to find iron, whether they were used to the old terrain generation and the old ore distribution, or if they're newer players. Iron isn't really surface level anymore. You have to dig a little bit deeper for it, which means you're putting yourself at risk to go and find the stuff that's going to be the best set of tools for you early game. And people don't typically bother to make leather armor before they go caving. You either can't be bothered to find the cows, you can't find enough cows in the area in which you spawned, or at that point you're saving the leather for other things like bundles, books, the eventual enchanting setup, even saddles now, because those are more recently craftable. And so having a set of armor that you can just throw on before you go caving deeper and have to try and find the iron at lower elevations where potentially you're running into all sorts of mobs, I think it makes sense to have copper in the rotation for the sake of people's early game caving confidence. Outside of that, I don't think people will be coming back to copper tools and armor after they've progressed to the tier of iron, but it also maybe frees things up for iron to be used for its more technical purposes in early game. You don't mind as much sacrificing your first iron tools or your first iron ingots that you get on things like buckets and shears and the stuff that kind of peripherally helps early game but can only be crafted from iron ingots. Likewise, if you're getting started in the technical game nice and early, you can save a bit of that iron for hoppers and minecarts and bits and pieces like that until you find a larger deposit of iron or start on an iron farm. So while I don't expect it's going to figure too heavily in my day-to-day gameplay as somebody who's continuing my world from I last reset in 1.20, so a few updates ago now, I think it makes a good amount of sense, surprisingly so, for new players and people restarting their worlds.
That's where I land on it too. For me, it's not something I'm really fussed about personally from a technical or usage standpoint. However, as someone that has a couple of data packs on the Citadel where I place items like swords or axes around the town, axes in logs that look like they've been used to chop wood, that kind of thing, I bounce back and forth between a stone and an iron axe just because they look best in the world compared to a diamond or other axes. And I could see maybe a copper sword on a wall or something that you want to make it look like not a sword. If all the swords are iron, but then there's this copper one, maybe that's meant to be decorative. Maybe it's meant to be a jeweled sword, or you can use your imagination for certain things. And I think that the idea of being able to use copper in that way is pretty cool for endgame players in terms of use cases. Things like having an extra armor to put on an armor stand for decoration. You've got all the different armor trims that now have a different base that you can put on top of, put them on top of. So depending on how players want to express themselves, it's cool that they have that. And like you said, early game, I can see it being a stepping stone, because I have experienced that where I have a bit of iron and I'm slowly working out my armor. I usually put on boots because I usually jump off of stuff more often than I should. And I'll go with pants or a helmet, but the chest plate is always the last thing that I make. And I would rather spend that iron on something more useful, like a bucket or something else. And so to have a copper chest plate to tide me over, I think would be really cool. And I can't remember who I was watching that I saw this, but a copper axe, I believe, has the same attack damage as an iron axe and other stuff, but it has way more durability than a stone axe or a wooden axe. So a copper axe is going to last you a lot longer and have more than just the one utility in early game. Like if you don't have the ores to make a sword, or you want something that's going to have like that kind of duality where like you're walking around chopping trees, but maybe you also want to be able to defend yourself, like having a copper axe could be really, really useful. And I think that has some staying power for that level of the game. Like you, I don't see myself using them past that level. Like I don't see it being something that's all that functional. I do like the copper chests though, in terms of like being able to make a copper chest, use those for decoration, have the different ages and colors and stuff of them. I think that's a fun change as well, to have those be something that you can build, with copper.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think copper chests are a really exciting like aesthetic addition, because we have other storage containers now. We have things like barrels that have like slightly different aesthetics to the standard double chest, but like I'm surprised we see metal chests before we see chests of other wood types. And I think that's to do with having them specific functionality. Like it makes sense that they pair with the Copper Golem, and that's a very clear signpost. Even the fact that the Copper Golem spawns in with one when you create them, it signifies these two are linked and they're going to have some sort of special interaction. But without the Copper Golem being present, you can still use them for a little bit of color-coded storage, or storage that feels like it suits your steampunk airship build or something like that, right? You could have like a treasure chest system for a minigame where the fresh copper chests are going to have like, the basic common loot, and then it gets rarer the further oxidized they are. So people get really excited when they see a fully oxidized copper chest in your minigame environment. They could fit really well into trial chambers too, stuff like that. So I think there's genuinely a lot of mileage to be had out of not just one, remember, 4 new chest types being added to the game, not to mention the fact that they can also be waxed. So if you want to go nuts with a resource pack and have them all look completely different, then you've got a whole world of chests that you can play around with. The implementation so far is great, though. I think the unique sounds that they have compared to wooden chests like really matches their personality perfectly. I think the texture looks really good as well. So all in all, copper chests are a really exciting addition for me.
And if you're using them for builds, like they don't necessarily have to be just a cool, like fully oxidized copper chest that goes great in your, Guardian farm or whatever it is that you got going on. Even just using the back of the chest or the side of the chest as a wall texture or roof texture, if it's part of a layered build where you can't see through the gaps, you've got something on the back closing that up, then you could use that as some sort of like sub-block texture, because chests are just a little bit smaller than a regular block. And I think that could be really cool for certain types of builds, like maybe even like the steampunky type stuff that you've got going on, like having that copper color exposed between stone, as a column of chests that aren't used as chests. They're just used for whatever pattern that kind of gives you and what that portrays in the build. I think that's kind of a fun way to go. I'm surprised at the whole metal chest thing as well. Like I was realizing that it was a mod pack that I was playing that had gold chests and it had iron chests. And the idea was that the iron chest had more storage, like it had more rows in it that you could use. But I'm sitting here thinking about the copper chest. So when you crafted copper chests, is it 4 copper ingots around a chest, or is it 8?
It's 8. It's 8. Like the full
8. Okay.
The full crafting interface fills up, yeah.
So it's way cheaper than to craft an iron golem that comes with a chest, right? Because
Yeah,
correct me
basically.
if I'm wrong, but a copper block is only 4 ingots, not 9 ingots.
No, it's 9 ingots now. Like
Is it 9 ingots? Okay,
they did end up
they changed
changing
it.
this a while ago, yeah, because the copper economy changed a little bit. But that's when they made the changes to that. They made the stone cutter give you more cut copper, and they made trapdoors out of ingots instead of blocks. And there was a lot of
Right.
rebalancing in the early
That
stages of copper
rebalance. Okay.
to make it what it is now. Yeah.
All right. Well, then it's not cheaper. I thought it was going to be cheaper. Well, I mean, I guess it is if you want some copper back. Because if you just want the chest, you don't want the golem is going to drop between 1 and 3.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you're between 8 and 6 is going to be cheaper than building. You know, it could be cheaper. It's not guaranteed. That works out because I was thinking like, man, if it was only 4 blocks to make or 4 ingots to make a block of copper, then like, why would you ever make a copper chest? Like, you would just make a golem, use the golem or not, and just use the copper chest that way. But that tracks. That makes sense then.
Yeah, copper as a resource block is the same as like iron blocks or gold blocks are. They just did that for the sake of consistency. But
Right.
yeah, briefly to go back to what you were saying about the copper tools and stuff as well, it's worth noting that this is a Bedrock Edition preview, and we don't know quite how they're going to factor into the Java Edition version because Java has cooldowns and different attack values and stuff for the different weapon types after 1.9 combat, which Bedrock
Right.
doesn't have. So it could be really interesting to see if there's more subtlety to the different uses of copper early game and how that compares to stone and iron tools. We have yet to see how any of that's going to shake out. So I'm actually really looking forward to the Java implementation of this and wondering if it's going to correct a few things about the Copper Golem that I've already seen a lot of people give as feedback. So that's partly what we're going to be discussing in the main discussion. We might as well roll straight into it. We're going to get
Sure.
to the listener emails that we had a little bit later in the discussion because I feel like they really come in the sort of after our first impressions and in the bits where we're talking about general feedback and improvements we think could be made to the Copper Golem so far. So Mojang announced in, I believe, a YouTube video initially that there were a couple of like teaser posts that people quickly decoded were related to copper as an element, and then they announced in a video that the Copper Golem is coming to Minecraft in the next content drop. It has been reimagined from the original concept at Minecraft Live 2021, where it was part of a mob vote and eventually lost to the allay. So we've had a chance to take a look at it already. I've at least spent some time in-game with it. Did you happen to hop into Bedrock this week, Joel, or have you got a lot of your information from like articles and videos?
No, I didn't have time to jump into Bedrock, but I did watch most of your stream, and then also watched some videos from Silent Whisper and Exumavoid, who Exumavoid is someone I go to a lot when I don't have time to dive in myself. I find that their impressions and feedback are usually pretty good, and so that's kind of like how I came about it. My first experience at all with it was the Mojang video. I noticed that first. I happened to catch the little trailer release. I thought it was kind of odd that they did. I mean, maybe it's just because we do this show and we've been doing it for so long, but I saw the black silhouette of the Copper Golem and the question mark on the thumbnail for the Minecraft video. I was just kind of like, well, it's the Copper Golem.
Yeah.
I recognize that immediately from...
Unless they
know,
did a
4 years ago.
curveball and they're like, we've made a gold one instead. Fooled you. You know,
Right.
like they're not going to do something like that.
Pretty similar. But so I watched the video and I thought it was kind of neat. And I think that the first thing that I noticed, of course, not playing with it, but watching it, is like the look and feel. Like it looks like you'd expect, but more specifically, it moves like you would expect. It looks like a wind-up toy. Like I kind of half expect to see a key out the back of it that the player has to like wind up, you know? And I think it's a really good example of the things that we've been talking about on the show the last couple of weeks, where we've had listeners write in asking about animation and updates and things like that. It's a really good example of a new mob to Minecraft that moves really well, even though it's still the same blocky design. It doesn't have knees, doesn't have elbows. It's a little stubby, you know, dwarf-like robot character, but it moves so much better than, say, a cow or a sheep does in Minecraft. And I feel like this is a really good example of being able to update animation to be more modern without having to change the model, change the function. Like, it's just a newer looking thing, and it really has some fun character. I enjoy the fact that its head spins around. Like it's 360, just like an owl. I find that very amusing. So I thought it was pretty cute. Like, it's fun. It's fun to watch. I think that's key. Is that yes, it's got some functionality, but it's fun to watch it do its thing.
Yeah, I will push back on that a little bit in terms of updating general animations, purely because I think it's a lot easier to make something with this kind of blocky model have robotic movements than it is to make something like a sheep feel like an
Fair.
organic sheep with the
Yeah.
amount of rigging they can do with this kind of thing. But like I absolutely hear what you're saying. And I think, yeah, the animations are perfect for it. The fact that it like has a series of kind of poses that it will freeze in, and it sort of transitions between those movements very jerkily, like works perfectly for imagining this as a little robot helper. I think the model is really no surprise. Like, it really has stuck very close to the original Copper Golem design we saw in kind of pixel art form. And the numerous modded iterations that people have created, both as Bedrock add-ons and Java mods. I think even on Hermitcraft right now, they have Copper Golems available as, like, statues and stuff. And there are just, like, little modeled versions that I think the iconography of the Copper Golem suited the Minecraft players' general mindset so well that they've remained this sort of iconic loss to the community when they weren't voted in as part of the mob vote. I think it was probably the closest race and one of the most kind of like the most mourned losses of the mob votes in general was the Copper Golem. So I'm very happy that they've decided that as a runner-up, it still found its way into the game a little bit later. And yeah, the animations have so much character. I was talking to XP when we were doing the Hermitcraft recap over the weekend, and he said they've made it actually look like the way I imagine the player looking when you can't find that one thing in your inventory, and you're just kind of like looking around jerkily, being like, I know I had this in here somewhere. Where is it? You know? And so yeah, I think it's very, very cool that they've got this much personality already as such a new addition. I also think it's really cool that they spawn in with the copper chest. Like I said, it clearly signposts that they have that functionality. It's a way of you immediately getting both an oxidized copper golem and an oxidized copper chest by using a block of the corresponding type. And they're not difficult to get hold of now. You don't even have to do the thing I love doing, which is place a bunch of them in a field and wait for them to age, because you can go and find a trial chamber. There are several other ways that you can get hold of copper and not have to go through the process of aging it. There's a ton of fully oxidized waxed copper in trial chambers already. You just go through, scrape a few of those with an axe, put pumpkins on them, and you've got an army of copper golems of whatever color you want. I think the way that you build them also kind of justifies their height. It's really cute bringing one of them in, popping a pumpkin down on a copper block, the copper golem and a chest appears, and the first thing it does is walk off the chest, and it's immediately so tiny because they are 1.5 blocks tall. Like, they're not like a single block, because the bobble on the top takes it up to 1.5 blocks, and that's actually part of their hitbox as well. I was experimenting with them a little bit and found that they couldn't walk into 1 block high spaces. 1.5 blocks was the threshold at which they didn't bump their head on the entrance and could make it in. But when they're sort of searching around, as long as there's a chest that's 1.5 blocks above them, they can interact with it pretty regularly. They get a little bit twitchier with different heights, depending on what they're standing on. But if you put a floor of slabs in a storage area and have one chest at sort of floor level with the slabs and one chest above that, Copper Golem can reach either of those no problem. Even if it's directly above their heads, they can get to it. So there's a few things here and there that are nuances that I was trying to work out on the stream. But I think the sorting that they do, it has fairly clear rules right now and predictable outcomes. It seems pretty robust from the tests I've done, but I was doing this in a village where there were naturally some villager chests around, and putting down a couple of copper golems and copper chests in the center of the village, they would pick up a loaf of bread that I put in the copper chest, and they'd go and find the chest in the nearby village houses that already had bread in it. And that was the testing environment that I was using it in. I will say I wasn't trying to use it in the typical survival base setup that I already have on stuff like the survival guide. So I haven't gone as in depth with them in terms of how they fit with my existing world, but I've at least taken a look at the functionality, trying to understand the rules of how they work a little bit better.
I thought it was really cool on your stream to watch several different copper golems go up to the same copper chest, take different items out, and put them in different boxes, or different chests. That to me was oh, okay. I can really see how this could be useful early game, because I'm thinking I come in from landscaping a bunch of stuff outside my house, and I just want to dump all of this stuff into one bin. I don't necessarily need to bulk sort grass Like I don't want a giant filter and a double chest full of grass, but it would be nice if I could put that back in a chest and have it be sorted. Even if it's over time, that's fine because I'm usually going off to do something else. And the way that, as far as I understand that it works is that the golem is looking for a chest that already has at least one of the item that it is pulling from the copper chest in order to place it there. And that's how I operate with my shulker boxes anyway. And over time, that's become how I operate with chests. If I've organized a chest, I never take the full stack. Even if it's a full stack of 64, my muscle memory goes pick up the stack, drop one, and then I put it in my inventory. And so I'm always leaving one single block in the chest of whatever that is, whether it's a stair, wall, slab, stone, whatever. And that's because when I go back to manually put stuff back in that chest, I want to be able to shift click stuff in my inventory, not place it. Like I just want it to go back where it's supposed to go. Usually it's like blocks, then stairs, then slabs and walls, or that kind of a thing. And so having an iron golem do that over time, I think is pretty cool. I don't see it being useful for, like you said, these giant bulk storage that you might have in the mid to late game. But if you're just starting off and you've got like a couple of double chests that are full of reams of different things that you're going to need for later, if you're an experienced player and it's new in this new world, then the copper golem I could see being really helpful for like sorting that kind of stuff out. And I feel like one of the pain points of early game Minecraft is having a full inventory, or in your case maybe even having a bundle full of stuff and then having to then sort that into 2 or 3 chests that are just sort of organized, but you want to go do other things. Like there's other things that you want to do, so to be able to just dump stuff into a copper chest and then move on, I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think the best thing that they are for right now is multi-item storage. I can imagine, and this could even be done with a little bit of redstone assistance, you end up with a series of like single items in a chest, the same way that with multi-item sorters with redstone, you effectively have to fill up a chest with kind of pre-programmed categories of like, if I want all the items from like the iron crafting set to go in here, I need to have an iron ingot, an iron nugget, an iron block, iron bars, this and that, stackable stuff like buckets and everything all has to go in there, and then the items get filtered through that. The Copper Golem is a mob-based way of doing that without all of the redstone trappings of it. So let's say, for example, you put all of those iron items in a nearby chest. The Copper Golem searches the copper chest, picks out 16 iron ingots, and it goes over to check all of the other chests until it finds the one that has the iron ingots in it, adds them to that, and then goes about what it was doing. It will also, weirdly, it doesn't add to existing stacks that are in there. It puts the items in the first empty slot, provided that the first slot in the row is not already that item. So like if I had a piece of bread that was like in the bottom right hand corner of that chest and the rest of it was empty, it puts the fresh bread that it's brought to it in the top left slot as a new stack. So the way I was thinking about doing this, you could have a chest that basically provides like a key of which items to put in there, but you put them all in the lower slots of the chest. And then you maybe take a comparator output from that and use that once it reaches above a certain threshold of items in the chest to activate a hopper to drain the items out. But because a hopper is always going to drain the items from top to bottom, left to right, what it's going to do is find the new items that the Copper Golem has put in that chest, drain them, and then cut it off before it drains out any of the key items. So there are redstone synergies at work here already. I think this is a really neat way of having a multi-item sorter without all of the behind-the-scenes like redstone difficulty that can happen. And like I'm already thinking about like little ways like that you could use to kind of adjust the way the Copper Golem behaves in your favor. And there's some really exciting possibilities there. Like they always place stuff left to right, so you put your key items in the bottom right and you understand that those stacks won't be added to. I think it works really well that way. I think the fact that they have hard-coded logic like that is going to be a blessing and a curse, because obviously players will want them to do something that feels intuitive and something that would involve a little bit more like programming or telling the Copper Golem which chest to look at and which one to go to, but I don't know if those things are feasible without giving the player a bunch of additional tools and UIs and stuff like that. Like there are some ways you could do it, but the methods get more and more esoteric. They're less intuitive. And I think the way Copper Golems feel right now just looking at them and trying to learn the rules of their behavior by observing them instead of reading them and absorbing the theory, I felt like I had a much greater understanding of what they could do and what would be possible just by observing their behavior. They're also really fun to watch. Like, I can watch them sort of walk around sorting stuff almost like a screensaver. You know, it feels like that kind of very, very like fish tank, like stuff in motion, very peaceful, aside from how noisy they get with clomping around and opening and closing chests constantly. I think they could be very, very watchable that way.
Yeah, once you got 2 or 3 golems on the go, 2 or 3 copper chests on the go, and all sorting different items, I did notice a lot of clanking. Like, I knew that the audio was ducked for the stream, but I could also kind of imagine like that would get really kind of tricky if you had that going on in like 4 corners of your storage system. Like, you had your own storage, you had your golem filtered storage, you had like different things going on. I could see that being kind of noisy in good and bad ways. Like, if it's something that you want, then like you could just create an infinite loop of a golem taking something out of a copper chest, putting it into a regular chest, having that hopper feed it back into the copper chest, and have the golem just kind of constantly going back and forth in this, you know, limbo of opening and closing chests. But because of that, you could add that sound effect to, you know, a factory or something. If you couldn't see that golem, it was just under the floor, like you could have this constant clinking and clanking of something happening, which is kind of cool. Like, there's not a lot of options like that, you know, every day added to Minecraft where you can have like a new sound that you can automate in some way. I was also thinking, we've mentioned this before, but a couple of years ago, Tango did that thing with baby zombies chasing villagers back and forth to create what looked like a busy Santa workshop. Well, now you could do something very similar without the danger of having to have like a mob like a zombie in there. You could just have the copper golem going back and forth if it's something that you want to see, and if it's not really doing anything important or functional, it's just doing what the mob is designed to do in a loop. It's going to add some cool background animation to your village or your workshop or your factory, or like whatever it is that you're doing, you know, your toy factory. Like, I think there could be a lot of fun implementations there. And like you, I like watching them move around. The animator in me is very satisfied with how they move. I understand that it's a lightning rod reference for their antenna, like the top of their head.
Mm-hmm.
If something in me feels like it's a little bit big, but also I like, my first kind of like, the designer in me said like, I kind of want it to be a redstone torch, like not a wooden torch, but I kind of wanted the top of it to have some sort of light on it, like redstone energy, like something to indicate like this is like a remote control, you know, kind of toy or something like that. Like, it felt like it needed that kind of a thing. The eyes do kind of glow like that, so that's cool. Like, I get that that's where they had it. And again, like, if it was to have a light on it, I would say more of like that yellowy copper, same like a copper bulb, like that kind of stuff would make more sense than like the red from a redstone torch. Especially if it doesn't have redstone interactivity directly, then that might be misleading if it had a redstone torch on it. But I do feel like it needs some sort of like, the antenna almost feels to be more functional, you know, because right now it just looks like a lightning rod. And I don't remember anything getting hit by lightning in your stream, and I've not heard anybody online say that they get hit by lightning more frequently than other things. But, you know, for now, it just looks like it's just like an aesthetic call out to the other things that are made with copper in the game.
Yeah. They also, because obviously this is only in Bedrock Edition right now, I loaded up a world, and obviously immediately it was in Vibrant Visuals. In the preview version, obviously Vibrant Visuals still very much a thing now. So you got to see the fact that the eyes glow a little bit, and I'm not sure if they are super emissive, since they're entities especially, like they don't want to do too much with like dynamic lighting, but they certainly look like they glow in a similar way to how spider eyes glow a little bit when they're coming at you in the dark.
Fireflies.
Yeah, fireflies, same thing. Like, there's a little bit of like that kind of ambient sort of glow to them. They have a little bit of polish to them. Like on the fresh Copper Golem, they're like little light kicks and stuff. You can actually see them reflecting the light as they move. And that, I think, is much more noticeable than the reflections on some of the copper blocks, because you'll only see those on like specific angles or directions when you're looking at them at specific times of day, whereas the Copper Golem has that kind of jerky walking motion that means the arms tilt at different angles and catch the light in different ways. So already they are adding into the Vibrant Visuals kind of ecosystem by having a little bit more of that added to them. One thing I wanted to point out, because of the changelog, and because I mentioned this briefly in the newsread, the changelog does say that they're supposed to interact with trapped chests as well, and obviously that leads to all sorts of potential redstone stuff. Like you could even have like a redstone lamp come on when they've got the chest open, so you can see when the copper golems are working, and it could trigger redstone circuitry for something else, or like let another copper golem out if one of them is interacting with a chest on one side of the room. It unleashes the next one, and you can time them or something. There's possibilities for stuff like that if they interact with trapped chests. Right now they don't. And I tried this a little bit on stream. It just seems to have been an oversight either in the changelog or when they were coded, and they don't interact with those at all right now. No interaction with other storage blocks either. They don't interact with barrels. They don't interact with shulker boxes. Same goes for like hoppers, dispensers, anything else that has inventory GUI. And I think this is ultimately a good thing. I think a lot of people would want them to interact with just whatever storage containers were nearby, because that way you don't get pigeonholed into just building stuff with chests. But I think it makes the rules more obvious. I think if you recognize it goes to the copper chest to unload stuff, and the chest is where it puts the items, there's no ambiguity there, and you can save some stuff to make sure that copper golems won't mess with it, which I'm sure is going to be a concern for some people, where they'll turn around thinking that they put an item in a chest and go, wait a second, where did that go? And then a little copper guy is already walking off with it. So I think there's going to be room for a little bit of tweaking in terms of their behavior, as we're going to get into like suggestions for how we think they can be improved. But I think ultimately the fact they only interact with chest-like objects, the things that look like the standard wooden chest and the copper iteration of that, I think that's a good line to draw. I think that's probably the functionality as I would want it. How do you feel about that, Joel?
So, I mean, before we get into the improvement suggestions, I did notice that it was really interesting that it was really taking on the NBT data of the items. So like even something like a shulker box that had items in it, and if the number or balance of items in a shulker box was not exactly the same, then it would put the next shulker box in a different chest. Like it wouldn't,
even if it's the same items but in a different order. Like it's that thorough about checking like the exact NBT.
Yeah, and I also feel like it was also color sensitive. Like I can't remember whether you dyed one or whether I saw someone dye one, but I feel like it, because it's a blue shulker box versus a regular shulker box, like it wouldn't put them in the same, even if they're empty, it wouldn't put them in the same chest. So that I thought was really cool, because again, like people were complaining about like stack sizes and things like that, because it only takes a stack of 16 at a time. But if it's taking a shulker box that's full of stuff and moving that around, like that's if you're using it to like if a copper chest is pulling in shulker box packed items from your farm, and that's the thing that the copper golem is moving around, then that's really cool. And that means that you could separately filter those items, put them in shulker boxes. All of those shulker boxes could go into the one copper chest, which, I mean, unless you have a monster farm, is not going to fill up that fast. Then the copper golem would be able to take like the redstone copper shulker box and put that in the redstone shulker box chest, and then the next thing, whether like blaze rods. Like I'm just trying to think about the different things you might get from a farm, and I thought that would be kind of interesting. Again, not the fastest, like you could do that on your own too with redstone stuff, but like it creates that kind of opportunity and character, and there might be some instances where that could be useful. But I did wonder whether it should be able to interact with shulker boxes, just because at the end of the game, that's the storage box that most players are probably going to use, because it is the most flexible. And I feel like I can understand why it wouldn't interact with barrels, for the same reason that you mentioned, like that you'd want something that you knew it was going to ignore. For all the same reasons that I mentioned earlier about my bee farm design. Like I wanted to use bee nests and bee hives inside the farm design, but I had to be careful, because I don't know, I'd have to look up the range of bees, but I didn't want bees nesting in something that I had used as like, this is supposed to be a filing cabinet or, a decorative drawer inside the house. I didn't want bees going inside the house and then nesting in that. And that's the thing with the copper golem, is that like you want to be able to say, okay, well, I've got barrels for me. The chests are for the copper golem. I know the golem is not going to go in the chest because that's part of the rules. So like I understand that, like I get that. But for me, I was thinking like, because of the way that I organize my shulker boxes, so this is more of a personal thing, I always leave like an item inside the shulker box, so it's always kind of like organized in a specific way. It would be really cool to be able to have that be filled by a copper golem. On the flip side, like it does create some build opportunities where you could have a chest, like you said, with those key items in it, and have the chest have the hopper drain into a shulker box, right? Like, so you
Yeah,
could
totally.
have that system set up. It just creates that extra kind of step. And I think that's one thing that I'm noticing as we move into, like, improvements and feedback that I'm seeing, is that a lot of the stuff that I'm seeing as suggestions removes gameplay. And that's just not something I see Mojang doing. Like, if it's something where, yes, this is possible with the Iron Golem, but it involves a redstone contraption, that's the direction they're going to go. They're
Hmm.
not going to fold that redstone contraption into programming that might be difficult to communicate to players into the Copper Golem that isn't really easily observable, because it just creates a really high functioning thing. And if it gets too high functioning, then it becomes less of a choice, as so many players tend to go for the most efficient direct line to do what they do. Then if the Copper Golem did certain things better than a redstone contraption, then no one would ever build a redstone contraption. They would
Yeah.
just rely on the Copper Golem to do it, right? And so I think that it's important to remember that, like, they want more gameplay and more ideas out of the Copper Golem, not less.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, it's there to provide personality to multi-item sorting systems and to provide a way into that kind of technology for people who are intimidated by redstone. And I think
Yeah.
it's great that that's the compromise. It's a complex under the hood thing, but on the surface it's a relatively simple tool, and simplicity in Minecraft can be built upon by combining other systems with it if you want something more complex, whereas if they make it too complex to begin with, it starts to feel pigeonholed and only feels like it can do one thing well. And so, yeah, I think I absolutely agree. I think there's so much room for combinations of different stuff to be tried there, and including all of this extra functionality into it might overcomplicate things too much. That said, I think it's perhaps time to get onto some suggestions we have for improving it, because I definitely have a little bit of feedback, and I know our email inbox does as well. The main problem I noticed when I was playing around with these things is that they get stuck holding items that they can't find a home for. And of course, this involves a lot of organization on the player's part when it comes to what items you're putting in the copper chest and what you have space for, what the golems know where to store or how to store. The thing is, the strangest behavior for a lot of players to reckon with is the fact that when a golem finds an empty chest, it's going to put the items it's holding in there to start off like the contents of that chest. It's going to find, okay, there's an empty thing here, and just assume that that's a space it can put those items in. It will also, by the way, do that regardless of whether or not there's another chest nearby that definitely has that item in, if it encounters the empty chest first. So you're going to have to be fairly specific about how you, like, place some of this stuff. But if it finds an empty chest, it puts 16 items in there, and it will continue to fill up the chest with that set of items. Then another golem could come along with a different item, look in that chest, and even though there's 26 free slots in that chest, more if it's a double chest, it'll go, oh, wait a minute, there's something in here, never mind, this isn't where I put the string. And then it goes to a different chest after that, when it could quite clearly be a place for you to start a fresh stack of the string. Obviously, that's how they have to work for the logic of it, for it to work as a multi-item sorting system, and for them not just to move everything from one chest to whatever chest is available. But I think the problem becomes when they've got these, like, leftover orphaned items that they can't find a home for, there is no way of collecting the items back from them without just putting down another empty chest somewhere else and, like, shooing them over to that one as quickly as they can find it, right? Or by getting an extra piece of string that you've got lying around and putting that in a chest so the golem is prompted to put the items in that chest. You can't pick the items back up off them the way you can with an allay when you want to change the item that they're holding. And I think that's functionality they could really use, because there's a lot of occasions where you find yourself, oh yeah, I put a stone sword in there, and now the golem doesn't know where to put the stone sword because I don't have another sword in there. Or even that the items are mismatched in durability or other NBT data, like book enchantments, for example. The golem is not going to put a power 5 book in a box that just has one mending book in it already, because it knows that book doesn't match the type, and maybe you want it to put it in a different chest. But there's not like a category of enchanted books all go in here that you can teach the golem to. So if it picks up a book like that by mistake, you want to be able to like remove the book from its hands and be like, go back to the chest, there's other stuff in there, ignore this item for now, I need to find a place to sort it. And I think that's maybe going to be a pain point unless they implement some kind of like right click on it with an empty hand and it takes the item off them so that they can resume their duties. If they do that, great. If not, I feel like that's going to be a frustration point for players who will end up with their copper golems idling instead of unloading the stuff they're meant to be unloading.
I noticed that too, and I thought there could be a couple of things. Like I thought an animation that would be different than them just kind of standing still and looking lost would be better. I thought holding the item above their head with two hands, as in like, "Hey, help required." You know, kind of like raising your hand in class, or like the way that a toddler asks for help. You know, just like adult, like need an adult. They do remind me of children. I think that that's something that's appealing about the Copper Golem. The way that they move around and kind of like herky jerky, they kind of have that, like, it's like when you watch a young kid puzzling through something and you can see the wheels turning. That's kind of what I get off of the Copper Golem. But I feel like that could be an indication of like, hey, I can't find where this goes. And sure, like there needs to be something that the player can do. And I like your idea of then like taking that stack from them or taking that item from them and moving it along to somewhere else, or restarting the cycle, or allowing them to go back to the copper chest and get something else. Especially if it's something where, like, I don't know, some accident happens where like you accidentally put an item in the copper chest or in the big chest that you've got feeding into your copper chest. Like if you drop something in there by accident, like seeds or something that's not part of your storage system, and the copper golem picks up the seeds, well, then that copper golem is just stuck and useless until you realize that it has the seeds and you can move it along. So I feel like that's definitely something that I would agree with, that it needs to improve on. I was thinking that it would be nice if, I understand that this is how it has to work, but it would be nice if it could put an item in an empty slot. Like I feel like that's something that maybe not necessarily an item like a 16 stack of redstone or something that's more common, but especially when it comes to non-stackable items, like I feel like it's very limiting. When it's great that it can grab a sword and can sort a sword, that's awesome. The problem is that if that one sword has got like one durability less than the next sword in something like, a zombified piglin farm, then like it's just gonna not know where to put it. And I feel like that kind of stuff, it would be nice if, like, well, this chest has got swords in it, I'm gonna put the swords in the sword chest, even if it's like a gold sword and that doesn't do mixed swords, like that's fine. But I feel like just being so granular on like the durability of something is a little bit limiting. Now, I like the fact that it sorts out enchanted books. Like there's a lot of things that the golem does that are either tricky to do with redstone, or like we're not able to do very well with redstone, so people tend to not do it. And that's sorting things like non-stackables, like books and things like that, especially because enchanted books have got so many different enchants on them. I like the idea of like, hey, you set up a mending chest for your mending books, you put a couple of mending books in the bottom of it, and then the golems just sort of put the mending books in that chest, and anything else they put in a different chest, which you could empty or burn or whatever. Like if the only thing you're trying to get out of a certain situation is just mending books, then like that could be really, really cool. So I like that part of it, but I feel like there's definitely something about, they do get stuck, and they do get stuck in loops, and like it would be nice to be able to have, I want to say, more predictable behavior. And I'll point people towards a video that I watched by Silent Whisper. Actually, Alistair pointed this out to me, and it's titled "Minecraft's New Copper Golem is Broken, and Here's How to Fix It." So if you can ignore the clickbaity title and the tone of the video in general, I think Silent Whisper's expectations are a bit high. I think they maybe align with some of the high expectations that we're seeing online from Minecraft players, but there are a lot of inconsistent behavior showcased. And I hope that as the preview and the testing continues with Java Edition for the Copper Golem, that we can get a little bit more predictability out of it, because I think that the part where you pointed out where it gets stuck, that's part, like right now that's predictable, but I feel like what we need to have is more predictable behavior when it comes to sorting stuff. And I don't know if we need a way for the Copper Golem to get itself unstuck, but I found that in the Silent Whisper video anyway, there was a lot of situations where even when there were multiple chests lined up in front of the golem, well within the range of its reach, well within the range of its scanning, it would just, according to the video, just skip over some, but not always. Like he would do the test 3 times and the third golem would get all the chests, but the first 2 would consistently skip the first chest, just wouldn't see it, wouldn't use it, and for no clear reason. And that's the kind of behavior that's frustrating as a player. Like when something in a game, or as you and I've experienced, like something behind the scenes when you're streaming, like when something with software doesn't work, but yet nothing has changed, like you've not changed a variable to change that outcome, it's really frustrating because you can't troubleshoot, you can't figure out what's going on. So if Mojang wants players to use the Copper Golem to sort items and use in these kind of systems, I think they need to have some slightly more robust rules. That may mean more restrictions, not necessarily more capabilities. They might have to dial it back a bit just so that it is very predictable. I hope they don't remove the non-stackables, so I think that's really cool.
Yeah, I think it's difficult because so much of the behavior you want it to be contextual, and that means a lot more both like edge cases where people aren't going to want it to behave that way and it does, and so like occasional frustration arises that way, but also it involves teaching the player that that's how it works without any kind of text-based guide beyond like the Minecraft wiki, you know. And more and more they've wanted these behaviors to be things that are intuitive and tactile and something that you don't have to tab out of your Minecraft window to understand how they work. There's a couple of emails actually that kind of talk about a little bit of that pathfinding behavior. So I think we'll probably start with Tim S's email because I think there are a couple of really good ideas here. So do you want to read this first one?
Sure. This is a email from a landscape artist, member Tim S., part of our Discord and part of our Patreon. More control over Copper Golem pathfinding. Hi, Pix and Joel. As soon as I saw the Copper Golem announcement, I knew I wanted to try them out right away. I tried to integrate them into my moss farm and sort out the output. My initial impressions have been quite positive. They add a lot of cute life to a build, and it brings me joy to see them working away. That said, I have encountered some problems with them. One golem is not able to keep up with the output of the farm, and as I add more, they start bumping into each other and sometimes getting themselves quite stuck. I'm curious to hear if this lines up with your experience and if you could have any ideas that could improve this. Perhaps a Copper Golem could be paired with a particular item, like an allay, to give more control over its behavior. Alternatively, maybe golems could prefer walking on copper blocks to help guide their pathfinding. More Tim S. got stuck in a crowd of Copper Golems. I particularly like the outro. I like that it's like you can see the player walking against the sea of Copper Golems, and their only mission is to put the thing away, and you're in the way, so they're just going to move you. I can see that in a film,
sort of hastily emailing the podcast from like, help, I'm stuck. Like I'm trying to do this on the move.
Yeah.
So I've also noticed that they have a hard time pathfinding around or through each other. And my thinking about this was like, I'm not sure if that's necessarily an issue for Mojang to fix or perhaps a design puzzle for players to solve. Now, this is going back to what you were saying about how if they make them too intelligent, then that sort of takes away some gameplay. Like, I'm curious if maybe once they've checked the copper chests and collected the items, you have the golems sort of around the other side of a looped circuit that makes sure that they return via the same path each time. If you do stuff like that, if you design your storage systems that way and think about them with the Copper Golem in mind when you're setting up like the chests that you want them to sort them in, rather than trying to retrofit the Copper Golem to an existing sorting system that you, the player, were used to using, then I think maybe you end up with some different design choices. And this is one of the things that kind of occurred to me when I was watching the Silent Whisperer video, since you mentioned it. The fact that he's trying to graft the Copper Golem onto an existing sorting system, or at least like a storage room where he's got row upon row upon row of chests, and the Copper Golem doesn't have the range to sort stuff into the chests that are like at the far reaches of this sort of corridor style setup he has. And that's simply a matter of scale, and it's one where, multiple Copper Golems with different drop-off chests at different points could maybe adapt to that area. But really, you've got to think with the Copper Golem in mind first, and make sure that there aren't any chests that are outside of its reach, or, make sure that it's got a radius in which it will check the chest. If it's got, 10 chests nearby, then that's the maximum number that it's going to travel to. And so you have to design stuff accordingly. So this way, uh, maybe like if they have dropped off stuff into this chest, they walk into a water stream after that, and that guides them back. I didn't actually check if they can be moved by water because I know iron golems can't, but like guiding them around on a track, almost like one of those kind of like penguin games, like the kids' toy thing, where they all kind of go around in a track and then go down the slide, and then they'll kind of make their way up the staircase to go again, and like they're all kind of following each other around in sequence. I think that could work really well for a Copper Golem design of storage system that would mean the automation functions without any of those hiccups and golems colliding with each other.
I like the idea of a preferred track for the golem, not necessarily pushing them to only walk an only path on copper blocks, but saying like, look, this thing is going to walk around your storage system or walk around to the chests as it sees fit. But if you can then guide it by saying like, well, it's going to prefer to walk on copper, very similar to how zombies will treat a trapdoor like solid ground and just walk over it, for traps. I think that could be really fun to work around. And I think that what's nice about it is that copper also has slabs and stairs. So if you have a multi-tiered build where there's a couple different chests on different levels, the copper golem is going to be able to see a chest that's as far away as I can tell, is 8 blocks away vertically, and then go up and have a path to it. And if you've got copper stairs, and you can tell it like not just to go up there, but go up there using this route, because the other route is going to be problematic. You're going to get turned around, you're going to get lost or stuck or whatever. I think about it in the same way that you see bees trying to find their way back to the hive, and they end up getting stuck under the eaves of houses, or they try to fly through windows, and because they're trying to go through the house to get to the bee's nest as opposed to around it. And I feel like that kind of stuff is probably going to come up for copper golems in more complicated builds. And so having the idea of copper, honestly, it feels like tracks or circuitry. Like you think about having copper in the ground and having the golem walk along it, specifically if it's there, is very cool. And especially if, like you've got it built in like a single line where it has like a right angle, it'd be really fun to watch the copper golem like go to the end of a copper line and then make a very strict 90-degree turn and then continue to walk in a different direction. Like I think that would be very cool to watch. And then I wonder, like in terms of changing, the path, like could that also speed up the golem? Because one of the complaints that Silent Whisper had was when you have that many chests for the copper golem to choose from, it's just constantly walking back and forth very slowly and checking these chests. And it checks a number of chests like every time. It doesn't remember where the redstone chest is. If that's where you've put redstone, it just kind of starts checking chests, as it goes down the line of 10. And that's one of the reasons why Silent Whisper put the golem in a 1x1 block, to try and have it be very close to like a dozen or half dozen chests that it can check quite readily. But even then, it didn't check all the chests that it could reach. So that kind of behavior, I think needs to be improved. Not that Mojang wants players to put them in a 1x1, but like that kind of predictability needs to be improved. But if you've got players complaining about speed and pathing, like it would be cool if copper golems maybe walked faster on copper. Like they still work just fine on everything else, but if you've got extra copper, then they're going to move a little bit quicker. Do they move even faster on waxed copper? Like that kind of stuff could be really fun, especially if the patina of the copper affected speed, like faster on regular copper and like slower on oxidized, or vice versa. Like I'm not sure what would be the best way to do it, but I feel like that could be really fun for setting certain lines up, especially if you wanted copper golems to cross paths, or if they had to cross paths, but you didn't want them to then choose the same copper path. If they were two different oxidized paths, then the different golems could then choose the different paths, which might also be a great way to have the age of a copper golem affect where it might go.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that as well in the next email in a second, because that's something else I've observed is the different ages of copper golems don't seem to matter as much right now. But yeah, I'll have my say about the copper paths. Like I like the idea, especially now that we have different types of copper blocks. Like you've got chiseled copper, you've got copper grates. I could imagine the copper golem sort of walking around on like the scaffold of a factory setting and having them sort of be these workers up in the rafters almost. Like you could do some fun stuff with that. But yeah, like it could be interesting to see them like used in tandem with existing copper stuff to bolster their functionality, and that could be something that emerges as a player plays around with them. It's not essential to their behavior, but it's something that you can use to kind of add to it a little bit later. Yeah, let's move on to John Binks' email. John Binks writes in about Patina and the Copper Golem, says, Hi Pix and Joel, besides sounding like a fantastic children's book, I really think that Patina and the Copper Golem should have a more meaningful effect. Specifically, I'd really like Mojang to introduce rule sets for the Copper Golem based on its level of oxidation. For instance, a fully oxidized Copper Golem might only search for exact matches, while a regular Copper Golem might first search each chest for an exact match, then for an item of the same type, like wool going together, copper together, tools together, and then some larger grouping and so on. I think 4 levels of search would make sense for the 4 levels of oxidation. Would love to hear your thoughts. John Binks died to a creeper that spawned in that bulky sorting system he no longer needed. Brackets, light up your redstone. Sage advice, yes, and clearly from experience. My main wish list feature, having played around with the copper golems for the moment, is that the different levels of copper oxidation affect them somehow. I think in the initial concept, they were supposed to slow down as they oxidized, back when the copper golem was meant to walk around and push buttons, and I think the overall idea was that once they fully oxidized, they stopped moving entirely. But part of the legacy, I think, of them having that lightning rod on their head was that if they get struck by lightning, they get the oxidation cleaned off them, similarly to how copper blocks do, and then they could start working again. So in this sort of Frankenstein way, they could be struck by lightning and brought back to life, which is a fun idea. But then, now that they are chest rummagers and kind of, professional sorters, I think that idea is maybe replaced by maybe we want some sort of functionality that corresponds to their age and how they sort stuff. And you don't want them to slow down and stop as they age entirely, because then that means suddenly your workforce stops sorting stuff for you. I don't know if I would want it as complicated as John Binks suggested here, because again, this is that esoteric, not very intuitive idea that, could come out through playing with the copper golems for a while, but you never find out about it if you decide, oh, my copper golem just needs to be waxed, so he always stays the same color. You don't necessarily want that behavior tied to a specific age of copper golem because of aesthetic considerations, or the fact that players sometimes just aren't going to bump into that kind of behavior. They're not going to sort of organically discover that too easily. And it gets too contextual. It starts to be like, which golem does which thing again, and you need to sort of look up a guide to how all of it works to begin with. My idea is that I would like the copper golem's oxidation level to match the oxidation level of the chests that they search. And this could maybe resolve some people's issues with them not, like, finding the right chests when you want them to go through a larger sorting system. If they only go, like, exposed golems only go to exposed copper chests, weathered to weathered, fresh to fresh, oxidized to oxidized, you end up with one chest down one end of the sorting system being one level of oxidation, and the fresh one is on the other end, the exposed one is on the other end. And that way you can guarantee that they stick around that chest because they aren't going to go to any of the other copper chests in order to search. Allows us to use some copper chests for manual storage whilst using others for automated unloading. If you want all of your copper golems to be fresh, you can use the other 3 oxidation levels as just aesthetic chests to hang out in your area without concerns about them being unloaded. I've also noticed that, like, the copper golems themselves don't seem to age yet. They don't seem to do that naturally, and it may be something to do with the fact that they're entities, and that involves changing entity data. But right now, the chests can age individually, but the copper golems can't. Both can be waxed, although the wax doesn't really do anything with the copper golem right now. You can, however, scrape the patina off the copper golem to age it back into the fresh copper golem again. So it's possible for them to de-age but not age right now. So again, I still think we're very early days when it comes to both the functionality and the ideas behind this and the interactions that a player can have, but I do think there is something to the concept of different oxidation levels of copper golems still having different behavior. And I'm sure you've got some input on this, Joel, so let's hear from you about how you think the two could be paired.
So I thought that the Copper Golems did age. I thought I saw that in a video, but it took a really long time. It was like 20 minutes
Maybe
or
it
more.
does. It's also something
Yeah.
that can't be sped up with spacing them apart the same way that copper
Yeah.
blocks can. So maybe that's just, again, anecdotal, and the fact that my copper golems spent a lot of time around each other because they were all going to the same chests.
Right. So I mean, if it's something that's going to happen, I think that it needs to happen quicker so that players can actually notice it. Like, because if an experienced player like you doesn't clock it, then like it needs to happen more often. Because otherwise it's just going to be kind of tedious to wait around for that. I mean, I agree with you, and I think that the extent of John Bink's email in terms of the way that they suggested Copper Golems could sort things is like too complex, and like it's how do you even communicate that to the player? How do you make that predictable without it becoming a really, really robust system? And that just doesn't seem to fit kind of what Mojang is setting out to do. I do like the age of the Copper Golem affecting something, and I was thinking that maybe the stack size that it could carry, or a small increase in movement speed, perhaps, could be good. That could be a good way to kind of have different things moving at different speeds for, again, use cases, but also aesthetic. Like if you wanted to have one Copper Golem moving slowly around your factory and another one going quickly, just to kind of have some variation there, then that would be kind of fun. The stack size thing, it's one of the few things that I could think of that could use a shift in it, and that could be clear because then you could see how many the items that Copper Golem was moving past. But then players that want efficiency would just always use the one that you'd use the most stack size, and you'd feel like, well, I don't want to sacrifice efficiency, so I guess I'm stuck with whatever patina that is of the Copper Golem. So I can understand why that might not be the best choice either. And I mentioned already that I think that Tim's pathing idea of golems preferring copper is great, and so I think that could be another really good way to do it. Say like a fully oxidized copper golem preferring to walk on fully oxidized copper compared to other copper. Also controls, gives the player control to like avoid traffic jams. Like it starts to turn into like a little traffic game almost. Like how are you going to line up your copper golems? How are they going to go back to the chests that they started from? I really like your idea of the copper golems going to specific chests. The thing that I'm concerned about this whole thing is once you have more than one copper golem and more than one copper chest in an area, because the horizontal search radius is 32 blocks, I think, for this.
Yeah.
How do you tell the golem what copper chest to go to? Like, how do all 5 of your copper golems not go to just the one chest all the time? Like, I don't know how it works when there's that many chests around, and I don't know whether they see a chest and they can't get to it. Do they again get stuck? Like, if they're just constantly trying to get to the chest, that they've clocked and say, hey, there's a copper chest over there. I'm going to walk into this wall on a treadmill because I can't get to it, and ignore the copper chest that's 2 blocks from him. Like, I don't know what that behavior looks like. I didn't see anything like that in any of the videos that I watched. So I'm curious as to what could be done for pathing. And I think that a combination of like either walking on copper blocks, or as you mentioned, having the copper golem ignore a certain copper chest because it's a different age, I think is a really good solution to that, because then at least the player can focus on, can have like 4 different copper chests in their base and know how the copper golems are going to behave. I don't know what that looks like with 8. Like, how does a copper golem that's only focused on oxidized chests differentiate between 2 different oxidized chests that are within 32 blocks of each other? Like, I kind of wonder whether the range needs to be dialed back so that players can specifically place them in key locations, as opposed to having one walking around your whole base. I feel like it's probably going to be better to have them be, maybe like a 16 block radius where like they have to be in this area for this to work,
Yeah, I think the way it's worded in the changelog, they check 10 copper chests for items, but they change their behavior to looking for a chest to drop items off into as soon as they find a chest that they can pull items out of. And then they check the 10 chests in sequence, but I don't know for certain if they go to the nearest chest and then they check for the nearest chest to them from there. and then the nearest chest to them after that. Or if they draw a line to 10 chests and decide, like, in a deterministic order, this is the order I'm visiting those chests now. So that's something I'd be really interested to hear from anybody who does, like, bits of code diving, if you can do that with Bedrock Edition, or if it ends up, something that's easier to decompile in Java, like, how that behavior actually manifests. That'd be really interesting to hear. Because I noticed in Silent Whisperer's video, there were a few situations where the golem would skip over a chest if there were 10 chests in a row. It wouldn't go to all of them in a line, and it maybe would check, like, chest number 5, and then skip over 4, and then go back to 3, and then go back to 5 again after that. And so it would kind of just go to whichever one it thought was closest, depending on how it's programmed, and, like, whether maybe it's, like, if it's standing right on top of a block containing a chest, does it not necessarily consider that interactable? Or, like, there were a couple of situations where it had to pick up on a specific face of a chest to understand that that was the side it was. And I was curious whether that corresponded to that part of the chest got placed first, because a lot of the time they were, like, double chests. So there's bits and pieces of things like that that are still unclear. Also, whether that's just Bedrock not having deterministic update order in the same way that it doesn't for Redstone, and so maybe on Java Edition that behavior might be more consistent because of the way Java Edition processes stuff single-threaded, so it's more linear. I think there's maybe a couple of bits and pieces that will become clearer once the Java Edition version of this is out. So still very much looking forward to that. I've also noticed, this is sort of a peripheral thing here, but the copper chests right now can't be placed side by side without them connecting. So this is probably something that will be fixed in the next Bedrock preview and probably in the Java snapshot. But it's sort of similar to how single chests, you didn't used to be able to place them side by side next to each other. And if you place a fully, like, a fresh copper chest next to an oxidized copper chest, when they combine, it takes the earlier age. So you end up freshening up a fully oxidized copper chest just by placing a regular copper chest next to it and combining the two of them into a double chest. It becomes a fresh double copper chest. So that's, like, I think that needs a bit of tinkering behind the scenes to nail that down, because there's a few things going on there with the chests not combining right. But yeah, hopefully that gets changed in the next Java Edition snapshot. All in all, I'm seeing a lot of little refinements that need to be made, and some things that need to be clarified if they're going to provide the information about these golems' behavior in the changelog. Are they actually supposed to work with trap chests? Do they search for the chests in order before they decide to start opening each one? Like, there are little things like that that would be really useful to know if we're going to use these to the optimal. All in all, though, before we wrap up, I think it's a really cool pivot for Copper Golems to see them interacting with storage instead of interacting with buttons. A lot of people were joking about the Copper Golem effectively just being like an organic randomizer, because it would just sort of push buttons whenever in the original concept. And now item sorting feels like something that has a clear and obvious impact on gameplay and changes things from being specific to Redstone behavior to something that affects players of basically any playstyle. So I think providing solutions for players who aren't technical, and these sort of complex Redstone systems no longer being required for players who want their storage sorted for them, I think that's a really interesting direction. So I'm really excited to see what's next for the Copper Golem.
Yeah, I think they're going to be the most useful for players that are either new or starting an early game that want a modest amount of sorting and some whimsy to their storage solutions. Like, they don't necessarily want a big system. Maybe it's a temporary build. If it's early game, they probably have a lot of copper around, like you mentioned. And so I think it's a fun way to try and get into that and have some organization early on. I think where they're going to be the most useful are going to be farms where item sorting can be either tricky, involve not a lot of space, or non-stackable items. Good examples are things like a zombified piglin gold farm, spawner farms where mob drops weapons, bows, arrows, like a skeleton farm, or piglin bartering farms. You're going to get some non-stackables from the piglin bartering farm, and you can sort the stackables on your own with filters, but then the rest of them you could just have them go overflow into a chest and then have a golem sort them out. And so those kind of things I think are going to be specific use cases that are not necessarily meant to augment your sorting system, like your base sorting system, but I can see them being really useful in the smaller systems that are usually attached to farms.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more feedback about the Copper Golems as more people get their hands-on experience with them. And so we've obviously like to offer up the email inbox to anybody who has more ideas for the Copper Golem, or even if we get a Java edition snapshot this week, some Java players who are able to chip in and share their experiences with the Copper Golem so far. For now, that's where we're going to end this episode of The Spawn Chunks. You can find more information about our show and links to some of the stuff that we've talked about today over at thespawnchunks.com. The music for the show is composed by me, and The Spawn Chunks is proud as ever to be a listener-supported podcast. If you're getting some value out of the show, why not consider putting some value back in? You can visit patreon.com/thespawnchunks to join our community. Pledging at any of our paid tiers gets you an invite to our patrons-only Discord chat. You can listen to the show live when Joel and I record it in Discord every Monday. We also have monthly hangouts, so our patrons can let us know what they've been up to, and a bunch of lively chats that you can join and ask questions and share in all of the Minecraft announcements as they happen. We currently have 271 patrons, which is down a bunch from last week, so we'd love to see that number creep back up as July continues. Special thanks go out to our content engineer patrons. Thank you to Hunter555, Jumbo Sale, Mindtrip Media, and That Penguin Dude for your support on this episode.
Sharing the podcast with your friends is the easiest way to support the show. It's free. Just tell a friend about the Spawn Chunks and where they can go to listen to it. You can find us on social media at the Spawn Chunks, pretty much everywhere. The show is available on Mondays on your favorite podcasting platform. That includes a video version that comes out on YouTube and a video version on Spotify as well. The RSS feed is linked on thespawnchunks.com, and the patron-only RSS feed is on the Patreon page. That's where you can listen to the render distance, the extended version of the podcast.
My name is Johnny, but online I go by Pixelriffs. You can find most of what I do at youtube.com/Pixelriffs, where the Minecraft Survival Guide is currently in its 3rd season. I also stream 3 days a week on Twitch, where I do behind-the-scenes work for my YouTube series. I'm the voice of the unofficial Hermitcraft recap, which you can find through a quick YouTube search. Aside from that, I'm at Pixelriffs on both Blue Sky and Instagram. Joel, where can people find you online?
Everything that I'm doing online can be found at joelduggan.com. I'm Joel Duggan on social media, very easy to find. I will point you towards the Citadel Cafe, my other podcast about sci-fi and fantasy entertainment. We are going to go watch Superman in the next week or so we'll be talking about that on the show, and that's available wherever you find your podcasts. And of course, I stream on Twitch 5 days a week, Tuesday through Saturday, and I do that at 1 o'clock Atlantic. That's UTC minus 4 hours. Lots of West still as we're pushing to try and finish that up, so come on by, twitch.tv/Joel Duggan.
Thanks for visiting the Spawn Chunks. The world outside is infinite, but give me long enough and it'll all be sorted.